Would you touch a poop on stream for $1,000? I'd do it for free.
Hello.
Hey!
How you doing?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Doing well. I decided to go live on Twitch for a little while, and I have over here, I don't want to brag or anything, but 26 whole viewers. So
Nice self-promotion. Looking good.
yeah, hopefully I can bring over some subs for you.
Wait,
so.
let me follow you. Hold on. I didn't actually know that you streamed on Twitch. I only ever saw you on YouTube. Hold on.
It's like a relatively new thing. Once I get a little more time, I'm actually hoping to stream a little bit more long term.
Are you playing Fortnite right now?
I am, but I'm about to turn off the sound because if you can hear it, it's probably very cringy.
No. I can't hear it. I just found your stream. My God. Fucking Zoomers. Wait, how old? I'm 27. You're 23?
Or
24.
24.
Okay.
So not even that much of a difference.
You are a Zoomer, though. You're at the tail end of Zoomer, and I'm at the head of Millennial.
96 I was born, so I just missed it. I just missed being the Millennial.
Oh, you did? Oh, hold on. When did Zoomer Gen start? Born in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Yeah, I guess 96 would put you in that. When's your birthday?
November 11th.
Okay. You're right on the line. Is 96 late 90s? You know?
It's exactly how I like it.
Living on the edge.
Super on the edge. No one knows.
So,
no, I'm just kidding.
Okay, before we get to the stuff that's relevant to the people listening right here, you got copyright claim for that fucking video too, didn't you?
Yeah, and I'm currently in a fight. Well, not a fight, but I'm currently working with the Blaze to get them to reinstate that.
Okay, because I talked to the lady, and she said she put me in I don't know, maybe. She said she'd put me in contact with Blaze TV's copyright lawyer, and I never got an email from that. So I'm just daring them to sue me now. So we'll see. Did they ever tell you? I
cannot believe that, dude.
Did they ever tell you you cannot post this video no matter what in its entirety? Did you ever hear that?
What they told me was you can post clips of it.
That's very
I was
ambiguous.
Like, yeah, exactly. And I feel fucking terrible about the whole thing because I was the one that invited you on, and then they were like, "Yeah, you can't stream," and then they were like, "Yeah, no, now we're gonna copyright claim you."
Yeah, they didn't tell me that I couldn't live stream until the nanosecond of the actual debate, which was, I mean, it's annoying, but I'm cool. I like to talk with you. You know, I'll put it out there.
Really
but then the clip thing, like that's very. You can post a clip of this to your channel. You can clip this. They say you can record, but never specifically say don't post the full video. That to me is no. That level of ambiguity is not acceptable.
It's not very professional.
We're all professionals here. They're more professional than I am. They have a company. I don't even have a LLC. I'm just doing this on my own. You'd expect that they would be very, very specific with the terms and contracts. You know, their agreement. I didn't sign anything. Yeah.
I mean, I talked to Elijah, and it sounds like what I'm trying to get them to agree to is basically to just reinstate the video. So we're probably still going to have to remove it manually, which is still really cringe, but at least then, you know, the channel won't have a penalty.
No, that's fine. That was the agreement that I was going to throw over to the copyright lawyer. Just undo the copyright strike and I'll take down the video, whatever. Just consider it a waste of time and I can just walk past
I know, it was so ridiculous. I got a TikTok clip out of it, which popped off a little bit, so there you go. I mean, something came from it, but I'm kind of fucking around. It really is very, very unprofessional of them, the way that they did that.
I feel like it was. I think it was a bit of a snipe. You're hated by conservatives, and so am I. I feel like there were a little bit, maybe a smidgen possible, a little bit of a clock tower situation. Somebody took the shot. Okay, that's speculation on my part, personal opinion.
I don't know. I mean, I hit up Elijah, so.
You actually initiated it.
I mean, I contacted Elijah and was like, "Yo, why?" Like, I was like, "What the fuck, dude? Why are you taking down our content?"
Oh, okay. I thought you meant to begin the debate initially. I didn't know. Did you set me up, Hunter?
Yeah, that was my goal. You got me.
The dramatic turnaround. If you did another leap back to the right, they'd love you. It'd be like, "Oh wow, you epic."
I'll be like, "I was a liberal, and suddenly I realized how intolerant the tolerant left really was, and like just do like the classic PragerU chit chat or whatever.
How intolerant have left-leaning people been to you, by the way? Because normally, like, you know, Shoe on Head gets a lot of hate from the left. I understand reservations held towards her in some cases. But generally speaking, when I see people talk about, like, you were a huge conservatives channel, and since then I feel like people on the left have been really amicable to you. That's just what I've seen, though. Like, maybe my community is biased in that respect.
No, I've definitely received a lot of support from people, and I think that it's really cool. Like, I think that a lot of people, especially on the left, have really practiced what they preach when it comes to like rehabilitation. So I definitely think I've largely, received acceptance there. Of course, I still also am dealing with certain people, you know, I guess you'd call them like the woke scolds, the types that just no matter what you do is never going to be good enough, that like you're always going to be that like reactionary to them.
The thing is, I don't even like the term rehabilitation. It sounds so stuffy. The thing that because the reason I really respect you, I mean like really respect you, like you'll be in my will if I die in a car accident kind of respect, is that it's not just a matter of personal integrity. Yeah, okay, just don't hold me to that legally. It's not just a matter of moving your opinion from X to Y. It's that when you're a public figure, the pressure to maintain your current position is enormous. It's unfathomably large. And you can guide people with time, you know, like a little bit from X to Y. Over time, you can move audiences. Lauren Southern's done this a little bit with, like, you know, she was like the alt-right and now she's like pretending to be a centrist and wahoo, okay, sure. But the clear, definitive switch from being conservative to start, you know, pushing for more left-leaning positions is been met with incredible pushback on your end. And I know that's been unbelievably difficult. And the fact that you stuck through it and then it didn't turn into some weird, like, oh no, I take it back, reverse grift situation is just so incredible. So, I mean,
I would not do that. No.
I know you.
I mean, that's why that's part of the reason why it's so fucking hilarious when people say stuff like Hunter had one debate with Vaush and then changed his beliefs. It's like, that's not what happened. That's not how it happened at all. But I mean, I definitely appreciate that. Yeah, I definitely, like, there are definitely some people that have been hostile. There are people that, like I said, they're always going to kind of see me as that like reactionary type. They're never going to unsee it. I actually kind of ran into some people a little bit like that with the debate coming up tomorrow with Lauren Southern. People saying like, you're not trans, you can't do that debate, and like just kind of like weird shit.
Wait, what's the debate about?
It's about LGBT issues.
Well, I saw, because I know I feel like most of the derision you get is from conservatives. I saw it recently. You went on a panel with Mouthy Infidel and Destiny were there too, and there was this what would you call him, like Fisher Price Fuentes, you know, like,
oh, that Alex guy,
the off-brand type deal, and he seemed like he came in there like, I know he has consumed so many 4chan memes about you, you know, like he came in there all bottled up, like balls full, you know. It's crazy how much like space you occupy in their minds.
It did, you know what? It's actually shout out really quick to the Surfs who just gave us a raid over here on Twitch. Very cool. Thank you, Surfs. Appreciate it. Lance. Thanks, Lance. Yeah. Oh shit, where was I going with that? This is why I have to keep my eyes off chat when I'm in like discussions. Help me out. Where was I going with that?
Me too, buddy, all the time.
Yeah. That's how it be. But yeah, that guy, that's right. It literally gave me like a genuine sense of joy the next morning when I get up and I'm like hanging out with my kids and like being just like a fucking goofy dad type or whatever. And I'm like, there are literally people on the internet right now that are like just seething at the fact I exist.
Yeah,
I don't know.
You're living.
It just validates me so much.
You're living the TradCon life, right? I mean, they're all because like all the alt-righters LARP about it, but in reality, they're like, you know, frothing, like coping and seething at their computers, like shakily jerking off to Lolicon. And meanwhile, you're over there like the Chad Hunter, living the TradCon life as a progressive. Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. The disparity. It hurts them.
It's always fun to throw that one at them too. Just sorry, the trad life calls. Gotta go, guys. Like, yeah. No, it's definitely fun. I think that It's funny too because the more hostile that the right has become towards me, the more that's confirmed that I've made the right move. I actually just did a video today talking about the right kind of starting to like eat their own when it comes to like Caitlyn Jenner and stuff. And it's so obvious, that mentality that if you're not with us, you're against us. Like that has really become so massive to the Republicans.
Yeah, the thing
and
that
the
always
conservatives in general.
The thing that frustrates me too is, so I criticize gatekeeping in the left all the time because it happens all the time. I think it's a worthwhile criticism. That being said, man, the fact that like we have allowed the discourse to move to a point where people act like the left are the ones who freak out if you leave them, conservatives lose their goddamn minds. They go apeshit if you abandon ranks. Like, I remember Lauren Southern came back centrist, big quotation marks. She's still what she is. And Paul Joseph Watson was actually having like an emotional breakdown in her DMs that got posted publicly. He was like,
I covered that on stream.
Yeah. And so, wow. Jesus.
He like flipped shit.
And she wasn't even on the left. She's not on the left at all. She still makes conservative talking points, all she had to do was not be as obviously aligned with Nazis. And people, not just Paul Joseph Watson, but in her YouTube comment section, were losing their minds. It's incredible, really.
It really is insane. I think it's also funny too when conservatives ramble on nonstop about cancel culture, and then it's like they're the first fucking people to cancel anybody that like dares disrespect Trump. I mean, like literally what just happened today with Liz Cheney, right? It's just it's hilarious.
Purity. It's internal. That is a very clean example of conservative cancel culture directed internally. Perfect hypocrisy just encapsulated within their own behavior. It's spectacular stuff. I really hope we're seeing like the breaking apart of the conservative movement in this country. That there are people who want to go the clear cut like Trump pseudo ethno nationalist road, and then there are the people who don't, and they're never going to meet eyes again. That's the hope.
Well, did you see what happened today with the 100 Republicans?
No. I didn't see it.
There's 100 Republicans are saying that they want the GOP to basically stop being radical, or they're threatening to start a third party.
Which Republicans are these? I assume they're prominent people, not.
Yes, yeah. They're. I can send you it. I don't know who they are by name, but there 100 Republicans have vowed basically with 100. Let me look it up really quickly so I can.
No, I see it here. Over 100 Republicans, including former officials, threatened to split from the GOP. Some former elected officials. Are there any prominent names here? So this comes after the Liz Cheney shenaniganry. I'll have to look into this a little more off stream, I think, or maybe just later down the line.
I just saw it and was like, oh no, I hope they don't start a third party.
Please, no. Please don't. Anything but that.
That would be so bad for them.
Watch me, if they ever get to third party off the ground, watch me instantly flip my my advocacy for changing the first past the post voting system. Oh God. I feel like we really immediately need to do something about conservatism in this country. I think we're running out of time to have our our wake up call. Especially with climate change on the horizon. Like, we can't deal with opposition internally when we're trying to lead a global effort to prevent the planet from completely self-destructing.
Yeah, it's really weird too, because like conservatives are usually pretty good with like getting in line and following the leader, and now they're starting to kind of like just break apart. But talk about being like internally divided. It's interesting because obviously I follow you and a lot of other lefties on Twitter, so I see some of the Lefty In Fighting that goes on. And I was doing a video on fascism a little while ago, and there was historically it talked about a fascist uprising, and the country was ran by leftists, and there was too much internal turmoil for them to respond to the fascist uprising in time. Like historically,
which country and time period was this?
I need to get my memory better.
Was it Spain?
Gonna reference shit. I can look it up right now in my notes. I have it in my script here.
Spain is a good example. We had the anarchists and the Soviet-backed communists were fighting against Franco, the fascists, and the Soviet Union actually turned tail and started killing the anarchists as well as Franco's fascists. And because of that, in part, the anarchists and communists lost to the fascists, which is pretty extraordinary. Mm. Now, my based position, of course, is that there were three parties at war there. Fascists, another group of fascists, and the anarchists. But, you know, that's me splitting the left again, of course.
This was the one that I was talking about was actually Mussolini, I think. A few years later, fascists began aligning them in the fall of 1922. Yeah, at the time, Italy at the time was led by a left-wing coalition that was far too internally divided.
Yeah, Italy. So, yeah. Also, there were, at least at the time that Hitler took power, the majority of the electorate were not conservative, weren't they? Hold on. Weimar Republic.
Yeah, you would know way more about this than I would, so.
It's been a while since I've looked at this. Was it the Soc Dems? Yes, the SPD was the most voted for. They weren't socialists, but they weren't conservatives. And of course, you know, the Soviet-backed, what was it, the KPD refused to work with the SPD because of the frustration following the, what was it, the Konstrat Revolution? Oh, God. Okay, hold on. I need to have a notepad somewhere because all of this is very illustrative, but I have such a bad memory that I can never piece together the facts without reminding myself of it on Wikipedia, you know.
Yeah, I know exactly the feeling. That's why whenever I do like debates and shit, I fucking have like a ton of notes.
Yeah, I never bring notes to debates because it always fucks up my thought process. Sociological stuff in debates is very, very fun for me because, I mean, obviously I majored in it, so I know at least a little bit about it, but it also feels like something that you can arrive at deductively, you know? If you have a piece of information X and Y, then you can usually, as long as you understand the processes by which you engage in sociological analysis, you can pull a lot out of that. I mean, a lot out of that. But with history, it's a historical argument can fall apart if a person just brings up a tiny historical detail that you don't have a counter argument for. They can make something up. That's the crazy thing. If you're, this is why I hate the Israel-Palestine arguments too, because I've seen the debates with Zionists. You have an argument with them, and you'll be like, here is 80,000 pages of evidence that everything Israel's been doing for the past half century is illegal, and they have no justifications, and look at all the dead people, and blah, blah, blah. And then one of them will go like, well, did you hear about the 1876 Land Rights Treaty right in this housing complex? It was Israeli territory all along. And you're like, and you're like, is that even true? And you have to like dig through everything. It's such a pain in the ass.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, it's the debate stuff in general is really a challenge for me. And that's part of the reason why I was telling you in DMs and shit that I'm gonna go into this Lauren Southern discussion as best and just do as best as I possibly can, and then after that, I'm just gonna focus on doing videos and just sticking to that.
Yeah, well, debating is a very difficult skill. I mean, people, at least for me in particular, the 2.5 years ago I started my channel, sure, but for years prior to that, I was a Discord debate lord. So it's, it's something to which I already had at least some interest.
Right.
With Lauren, so you say it's going to be LGBTQ issues with Lauren Southern?
Yeah, so I can kind of.
What's the premise? Give me the lead in. Like, what's anything in particular?
We're mainly going to focus. Yeah, we're going to focus on, I'm guessing, on gender/trans issues. She said she doesn't really have too many opinions on LGBT issues as a whole, more just like trans issues.
Of course.
So I already have a feeling that this is going to go into the, kids or genital mutilation.
Yep, every time.
Every time. So I talked to Demon Mama yesterday. I also watched both of your Rhetoric 101 and 102 videos and took notes. So, yeah. I was hoping, though, that you could let me know what you think of some of these approaches I'm kind of thinking of taking.
Yeah, roll it by me, and I'd love to offer any particular thoughts I have on the subject. I'm very flattered, by the way, that you would consider what I've said worth looking at.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that like I said, that we're able to chat for a few minutes here because I wanted to ask your advice on just like basic rhetorical strategy and stuff.
You can come on my stream whenever you want, man. You're a friend of the stream. You can Most people I hang on for months. I'm just bad at responding to DMs. If you ever want to come on the stream, you can just spam me one message every hour on Discord, and eventually I will see it.
Okay, I'll do that next time.
Yeah, just have
Well,
a
I
bot
appreciate it.
send a constant flurry of racial slurs at me, and eventually I'll think, Hunter, no, okay, I'll bring you on. Jeez, stop subjecting me.
Just please stop. Well, it's okay to say the N-word in private. Like that's what Destiny's. All right.
Whoa.
Anyway, I'm kidding. That's a fucking joke.
You just added 6 months to your left purgatory, my friend.
My approach though with Lauren Southern is to just try and just be. And listen, I know I'm going to get criticism from the left for this, but I want to take a good faith.
Yeah.
I want to take a good faith and a charitable approach for multiple reasons. For one, I am not as good when I'm too aggressive, and that's one of my flaws too in debate is I get too aggressive. And another thing is that Lauren Southern she comes across as a very good faith individual that just wants to have a conversation, and so
she comes across as that fairly well. One thing that frustrates me, a lot of people, they look at Lauren Southern and they're like, she's so stupid. This should be an easy debate. No. Lauren Southern is a very effective rhetorician. Have you seen her documentaries? My God, she made a career off of peddling bullshit. Just because a person's positions are stupid doesn't mean their ability to argue those positions is ineffective. That is not the correlation between being correct and being rhetorically effective is negligible. So it frustrates me. Some people are like, oh, she's so dumb. How could you even no, she's quite talented. And if I were to speak to her, I would also come off amicable. I know it would trigger the fuck out of my community, but yeah, no. If you come into a conversation like that where she's coming off like, I'm just a whittle tradcon wife. I just have some questions about the trans people, and you're like screaming at her because she hasn't read 16 volumes of like modern gender theory, you're going to come off looking like a fucking lunatic,
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of like, especially because I used to be on the right, I'm going to try to take that approach, try to take the approach of I think that I actually have a really good opportunity here to make like positive change. And even if it's not, changing her mind, I think that as long as I'm stay calm and amicable, that I'm going to be able to come across and deliver my arguments better. I'm also going to try to take a more like just educated approach. Obviously, I have 10 pages of notes and I've researched a bunch. I listened to like Xander Hall's debate with her and a shit ton of other.
Make sure to get your studies straight.
Yeah, I got that. Yeah, I did feel bad for him when he messed up the study thing. I was yelling at my TV there.
It happened. But it's a matter of, and the mistake there actually wasn't the poor memory. It was a matter of presumptuousness. If my memory is terrible, which is why very rarely will I directly cite a response to something. Like, I have this, I have that. If you say something like, I think I've heard that before, and you take a second on it, it's usually a little bit more insulatory. Because you can say 1,000 correct things, and then you can make a mistake on one point, and that's all they'll ever remember. It's very, very frustrating from our perspective.
It is extremely frustrating, and that's part of the multitude of reasons why I'm deciding to just kind of give up debate after this. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that I guess I want to try to appeal to her in the sense that, like, for example, I think if I get a chance to say something along the lines of to assume charitability and then to basically form my arguments is something along the lines of like, Lauren, I don't necessarily think that you're transphobic, but I think that, you want to be careful that you're not spreading or being a useful idiot for like transphobia or something like that. I know that sounds probably shitty here, but just kind of thinking out loud there.
I would, if I were, may I make a suggestion?
Please.
I would suggest avoiding the term transphobia altogether. It carries moral weight. Your goal should be merely to assess the facts of the matter. And I've seen how she talks about trans issues. She's going to cite things which are factually incorrect, or at the very least, she's going to make statements that are easily disproven with available evidence. So it's more a matter of constant debunking. Because once you say like, oh, what does it mean to be transphobic? I just have questions. This is always what they do. Questions, because they don't have answers. The answer is implied. Either you kill the trans people or you ignore them. That's the implied answer. but they can't
Right.
say that. So they just, I don't like this, I don't like that. Why don't we let the kids, they wait until they're 18, then they can make the choice. But of course, they don't want them to be making the choice at 18 either. That's just the next argument over. You give them
Right.
point A, then point B, they'll argue, well, I don't think anyone should be mutilating their genitals. Actually, they should just be getting therapy to cure their gender confusion. And if you give them that, then eventually she'll go back to making arguments about how homosexuality is unnatural. It's always what they can get away with. So
Yeah, you're right. That's completely accurate, honestly.
it's
Hold on
about
one
the
sec. I
factual.
just have to step away from my computer for 3 seconds here, sir.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you already sound distant. When is she talking to Vaush? I wonder if Lauren Southern even would. I wonder if I even should. I feel like I'm more relevant than she is these days, except my memory.
You feel like Lauren Southern would what?
Nothing. The chat was probing me to debate Lauren Southern.
I would love for you to debate Lauren Southern. I think that generally that for this kind of a discussion, I already feel a lot less nervous for this one, for example, to just think of it more as I'm going to go in here, I'm going to have a conversation with Lauren. I used to be a fan of hers. I used to be on the right, and I keep trying to think, how can I be charitable, right? Like, okay, I think the fact that she was able to risk some of her audience and her income by making the video where she said she's going to go more to the center, I think that is amicable enough, even though some of her ideas are still very far right. Like, I feel like I could start from there and kind of work from there, I guess.
Yeah, because the line, and I think this is true for you, by the way, so this isn't a disingenuous statement to make, is that, for you, it wasn't a matter of your ideology changing. It was just that you became more interested in the particulars of these issues. You found evidence that seems to contradict the conservative mantra, the narrative. That's always a very good dichotomy, I used to believe what you believed, but I familiarized myself with the evidence. And and then the word mantra, doctrine, these imply propaganda, they imply indoctrination. It didn't seem to conform to reality. So I have questions. And if you can, and this won't ever be easy because she gish gallops like a motherfucker, but if you ever talk with Lauren, if you ever have the opportunity to be on the offensive during these conversations, that is spectacular, because it's always them asking the questions, and she'll posture and she'll grandiose,
Right.
Look, I don't have a problem with trans people. I think people should do whatever they want to do, okay? I'm in favor of free speech and living in a free country, and that's their right. I just don't think that these gender ideologues should be convincing doctors to push this type of stuff onto children when little kids, they're already dealing with enough. Now we're involving gender in it, and they all have this very practiced speech, the what about the kids type thing. It could have applied to homosexuality 50 years ago. It's all the same. But if you ever get the chance, you posing the questions, a little easier. Hey, I was taking a look at the overwhelming body of evidence on this regarding puberty blockers, and it seems like there's a lot of really strong evidence suggesting that they're safe. They were used on cisgender children since the 1980s to treat, hormonal conditions, and we saw they really didn't have any significant impacts on bone density. It's a relatively marginal thing. And additionally, the rates of detransition after you take these puberty blockers and then transition afterwards is vanishingly small. Something like 95 to 99% of people who go on puberty blockers then go on to transition. And of those who go on to transition, only a fraction of a percent go on to detransition. And of the fraction of a percent that go on to detransition, the most cited reasons why they're detransitioning are because of A, lack of support from friends or family, or B, no longer being able to afford the necessary medical treatments and medication. So when we're talking about all these people being hurt by being rushed into gender decision A or B, we're actually talking about an incredibly marginal fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent of children. And you have to keep in mind, we're not risking them for nothing, because all these trans kids who we helped out have vastly lower rates of suicide, meaning that the total number of lives saved, the total amount of good done, is overwhelmingly high. And this is only being done because the science on this is secure. We know that. We wouldn't have done it if we didn't know that. And then, of course, she might say, well, that's why the reason why suicide risk is just as high pre and post transition. And that's not true. I actually have
get to go into that study.
Yep, that's one of those studies. I have it in my document. The methodology on that study was so bad. I have a feeling that the researcher was fucking with trans people when they put it up. But yeah, no. The risk of suicidality is significantly lower post transition.
Well, yeah, you're completely correct. I know that.
Sorry for rambling. I'm just saying, like, that's the
No, not
line,
at all.
right? Because in reality,
Yeah.
what I just said is going to be the argument you have. It's really just a matter of which one of you more effectively delivers the talking points, you know?
Right, exactly. And see, that's where I think that I have my main issue. And this is kind of what I wrote down. And I wrote down a list of what I do wrong and then what I do right. Because since you talked about in your video, recognize what you do right and wrong. Um, and so what I do right, I do think that I'm pretty good at remembering the facts, remembering like the statistics, generally speaking, and like the context and the content of the argument I think I have down.
Mhm.
Unfortunately though, and this is another reason why I kind of want to step back from debate after this, is it truthfully infuriates me that I could have the best argument but still look like I lost a debate because some other person talked better. Like that bothers me a lot. And so I think that I'm more rhetorically effective when I do script my content. I think when I'm in my debates though, I constantly am messing up. Those are the only things I do right. What I do wrong, if you don't mind me spieling off here for a second, I'll read this quick list. I get too aggressive. I interrupt too much. I get too hung up on like everything they say. So I get too caught up in just like trying to address what they just said, and prove why that's wrong. And then I don't have good rhetorical strategy. And then because of that, I end up letting them control the conversation. And I wanted to ask you how I control the conversation without being too aggressive or interrupting.
Yeah, I think,
like a ton.
well, one of the things, this is actually a disadvantage associated with being correct. And it's that you want to always have and deliver all of the correct things that you have to say. This is the wrong thing to do in a debate. In reality, what you need to do is control the flow of information on both sides and to make sure that when you retort in a manner which is as rhetorically effective as possible, but not in one which delivers all the necessary information. So say, for example, that we're talking to Brandon Tatum. That's the name, right? Brandon Tatum?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're talking to Tatum. And he says 17 wrong things. Okay. Standard sentence from the guy. And the temptation is to think like, all right, I have data on 6 of those points, and for another 11 of them, I feel like I have a really strong idea on how he's wrong. Okay, so let me just, as soon as he finishes, I'm going to go and run through them. And what will happen every time is you'll run through 1 or 2, and then they'll jump in and retort to what you just said. But you'll notice they don't actually respond to the totality of your arguments. They just say a thing that makes them look good. They can repudiate the evidence that you've provided. They can make fun of you. They can say that you ignored a point of theirs that you haven't even had a chance to address yet. They can accuse you of gish galloping, even though you're only responding to points they made. And then you have to respond to that thing that they said. It doesn't work on our side. They're taking the shots, and we're desperately trying to collect every little piece of paper that we can to assemble an argument against them. When they say something, don't listen to all the individual arguments and think of all the individual ways to respond and then think, I'm going to do all of it. Pick the good one. Think about it, take a deep breath, wait for the weakness in whatever it is they're saying. And there's always a weakness. Sometimes it doesn't even have to be a good argument logically. Fuck these people. If they want good logical arguments, they can read studies. Debates are about rhetoric and not lying, ideally. If you're talking with a person and they lay through all these points, you don't need to respond to all of them because they didn't mean half of them, first and foremost. And second of all, the audience isn't following every point they make. They're following the flow of the discussion, the perception as to who is performing the best at any given moment. So Brandon Tatum lays out the 17 bad points or whatever, and rather than respond to all of them, you can say something like, Brandon, I don't know how many times I have to say this, but your personal experiences aren't the same as a real study, okay? You're doing the same meme that the SJWs do, where they ignore reality in favor of their lived experience. You're doing it from the other side right now. Horseshoe theory is being proven to be live, okay? Please, the next time you respond to this, the next word out of your mouth, do not let it be some story about your childhood, because, well, you're great, and your family was great, I'm sure. That is not indicative of these broader trends. You can ignore almost anything, everything that he had to say. He could have said something about black fathers. Fuck it, who cares? I'm not going to argue with a black guy about black fathers. That's not going to look great. I'm white, Just throw whatever looks good out there. Now he's on the back foot because he's provided an argument that he can't ignore. If he ignores that and continues with the anecdotal arguments, then you can just bring it up again. And that's the fun part, too. You have to be mean with these people. Not loud, but mean. If they do it again, you're like, Brandon, I just said, Brandon, please, I'm begging you. I'm trying to have a conversation with you, Brandon, and you keep telling me about your childhood. I'm not your therapist, okay? I came to this with studies. Is this how you think like government should be run? Like all the Congress people up there should be like sharing their 9th grade book reports to each other? Is that how you want policy to be determined? No, Brandon, please work with me here. Like, as if you can just run it through like that. But it's always about finding that weakness, the thing they'll be able to answer as ineffectively as you can. I know I just went on a tangent there, but that's
really helpful, because that's definitely what I'm doing wrong. I hear the argument and my first inclination is to go through what they said and explain why what they said was wrong. And I've recognized that that's not working.
Yeah. Of obviously. Course, sometimes the best retort is to directly point out a factual inaccuracy in something they've said. But it always depends on the conversation. And it also depends on the arguments they're making. Lauren Southern does not make arguments that are based in fact. Most anti-trans arguments from conservatives boils down to disgust, revulsion, or fear. Because trans people are spooky if you're a conservative. I mean, oh God, you can be a woman when you have a penis now? Oh, you know, what else is possible? So it mostly comes from a position of disgust. And these arguments about, like, what about the children? These children shouldn't be taking puberty blockers. These arguments are rooted first and foremost in a pathetic attempt at using moralism to overlook the actual arguments for or against a position. So arguing the facts isn't actually how you change their minds. It's giving them the better narrative. It's giving them the better system to believe in. You lay it all out. It's safe, it's easy, and you're the one killing kids by denying them this safe medical treatment. And if you lay out that strong narrative, now we're not talking facts and figures anymore. We're talking, why is Lauren overlooking reality to justify a murderous ideology? And that is an indefensible position from her side of things.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so whenever you explain this shit, it sounds very, like, clear and concise to me. But then when I'm
debate,
and then when I'm in the debate, I'm like, oh, that was wrong. And then it's just... it's hard to, like,
you see my debates, I don't know. I fuck up too. It's not like every debate I do, I run ahead of them. I run circles around them. You know, if you just bring on
you
Discord
win every debate you do.
No.
Like, it's your job. So obviously, I mean, you kind of, like, there's an immense amount of pressure on you to do that also. So
I think I have a reasonable track record, but there are always ways in which I could improve. And I think about that often. And everything I'm saying to you right now is like, you know, a perfectly spherical cow in a 2D plane with no air resistance, you know? We're talking theoretical. In reality, obviously, people get heated. Lauren Southern talks very quickly. You forget little details. People get flustered. Everyone does this, including me. So it's something to be expected. But as a general template, I think this is a good way of approaching these types of arguments. It's about the narrative, the flow of the conversation, calm and confidence, come off charitable. You don't want to look off like you're just ignoring what they have to say, but you never want to look like you're being led around by their talking points.
Right. And that's kind of that's going to be a tough line for me that's going to be tough for me, because I also feel like if I'm really charitable and kind of just... it's something I've been watching a lot of Destiny debates too, and something I really like that he does is kind of just lets them sort of control the conversation at first to sort of build like a general framework, and then when he works within that already established framework to just pick their arguments apart, it's really effective. So yeah,
you want to beat them on their own front always.
Right.
If you come in really angry, I've made this mistake before. This is something I've done as well. If you come in angry or presumptuous, then it feels like the two people are having two different arguments, or it feels like you came in with baggage, that you weren't really here for the argument, you're here for the person. Remember, in practice, a debate is always in theory, a debate's always supposed to be about the argument being had. The people delivering it, the agents responsible for conveying both sides of the arguments, are tangential. That's the theoretical. Now, in practice, that never happens, but in theory, you should always be coming there for that argument. Coming in angry means you're coming in for the person, because nobody comes into an argument angry if it's just the argument being considered. There obviously has to be some pre-existing personal baggage that's throwing people off in that respect. You know Lauren Southern's dealio, too. I mean, you've seen how she debates, her way of handling these issues. I feel like her method for presenting and quote-unquote debunking the trans kid issues is a fairly consistent one. It's one you see in a lot of conservatives. It's pretty much the only line on this they've got, this, what about the kids type dealio.
Right.
So I think that it's well cemented enough that you should feel confident in presupposing a few things before you go in there. Just understanding how she'll respond, preempting a few arguments, maybe even answering questions before they get brought up. The bone density thing, for example, you can say, and these are tested safe. And yes, there is a slight correlation to decreased levels of bone density, though interestingly, and this is a real fact, by the way, interestingly, it's been found that when you take puberty blockers, the effects that those puberty blockers have on your bone density decrease the sooner you start taking hormones after using the puberty blockers. Meaning that the earlier you take HRT after getting that puberty blocker, regimen started, the healthier your bones are going to be. So that's actually an argument for getting the process started, even sooner maybe, or as soon as it can be done safely without incurring an additional risk of detransition later.
Right.
Now, in reality,
yeah, go ahead.
In reality, that argument that I just gave you has nothing to do with anything Lauren Southern is going to say. Because from her framework, the position that I just laid out, the idea that you should do it sooner to avoid X or Y, it does not actually aid in your argument. If you're looking at like point by point logic wise, it's something she could easily move past. But it sounds good. And I sincerely doubt that Lauren is familiar enough with the research to debunk or at least counter-argue why that piece of information isn't relevant to the conversation. Makes you look really good, though. Like, oh, I even have this quirky piece of info on how to ameliorate one of these problems. And look at that. The solution is to be trans sooner. Ha! It sounds good, no?
Got him. Yeah, it absolutely does. And I know how you've kind of talked about that before, too, is, what did you say? Don't argue from your own mind, argue from the mind of the audience, which was really eye-opening for me, too, because I definitely... it's kind of weird because some of the debate stuff I've had to just take a step back and assess, like, why, what am I doing wrong, right? And I think some of it is my motivation. I think that some of it is that I'm too motivated by me wanting to look good, and that I am too caught up in arguing from my own mind rather than from the mind of the audience. So, I mean, I have written down here, pick the weakness. You don't have to respond to all the points, like pick the weakest one and then give them the better narrative, which is the overall, I guess. My question for you also is, like, you talk about like strong rhetorical strategy. Like, what does that actually look like? Like, if my point is gender, like, for example, if my point was gender transition helps trans people, okay, if that was my point that I wanted to prove, my initial instinct, right, is to obviously go to the data and the numbers, but I know that that's not right.
Make an argument. Like 30 seconds. Give me an argument. Any point you want relevant to the Lauren Southern discussion.
I would probably say something along the lines of, if you want to look at the multiple different studies that have been done, the meta-analyses on this, it shows that for the most part, transgender people's, their health seems to fare much better after gender transition. But that's pretty much all I would have.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's my issue.
It's just a matter of phrasing, though. I mean, here, and I'm ballparking it, right? Okay. Now, evidence on trans people, data on their existence and health has been out for a while now, and the evidence to gender transition being helpful to them, both in terms of their mental health, their ability to engage in employment, their likelihood of finding friends, and their quality of their lives is overwhelming. I mean, it's not only is it overwhelming, it's multilateral. It's across the board. For all I've tried, I cannot for the life of me find any evidence that, trans people are hurt by transitioning. Right. So I just, it's beyond me, Lauren, why you or anyone else, people who talk about, respecting the data, would ever even try to make that argument. I mean, if you want to make the argument that maybe trans kids, like there's some moral quandary there with youth transition, then sure, we can have that argument. But the idea that transitioning in general isn't helpful is delusional. Something like that, And that,
so kind of double it down. So like deliver the facts and then construct, like, what would you call that? Like an attack?
The facts are secondary. If they challenge the facts, you have them, you can provide them, you can get in the weeds there and win. It's about doubling down, giving the audience a very strong sense of your confidence of what you believe and how firmly you believe it. Not that you just came, because this is something the conservatives will always do. They're like, study lord, debate bro, Wikipedia lover. Like you came with a bunch of studies in your hands. Mention studies little, I think. I've found over time that mentioning them tends to give them a jump point at you. I've looked at the evidence on this. It's overwhelming. I've looked everywhere. I'm sorry. I try to understand your take on this, and I cannot for the life of me. And when you do that, it looks like, you're reaching out a little bit with this, like, can you provide me any evidence? She can't, and she won't. So you're fine to push on that if you'd like. And you cement it, you double down. So I'm so confident in this information that your disagreement with me is something I consider to be a sign of delusion on your part. I am so confident that I am correct that you dare come to me with this?
This measly peasantry data?
This
argument?
Yeah. Now, she might have a couple of studies, but you're going to have to read the abstracts and whatever she throws out there, because they do this all the time.
I know what studies she's going to bring up already. It's going to be the Swedish one.
Yeah, here's a study on how actually transitioning makes children explode. And you look at the abstract and it says nothing of the sort. Oh, one other really important thing, before I forget, you need to make sure to separate the arguments, okay? Because in reality, Lauren Southern doesn't just doesn't like LGBT people. Because Lauren Southern is, if not a Nazi, at the very least leans as hard as you can in that direction. I don't buy the centrist shit at all. But you can't argue against gay people these days unless you want to be deplatformed from every social media account you have. So the trans kid thing is like the gesturing at it, you know what I mean? That's like where you can get, that's as close as you can lean. And you have to be very careful about segmenting the arguments that you make, So what
does that mean exactly? Yeah.
What I mean by that is, don't let her run away from the point being made now. Hey, you don't have a problem with gay or lesbian people, right? Or like gender nonconformity? No, I don't. Okay, then that's off limits then. Oh, like trans people. So you don't have an issue with like adult trans people who like transition? Like, no, I don't. It's a free country. Okay, that's off now. That's my territory. And then you get them on the finer points. So you agree then that, let's say you're an adult and you think you're trans, you've believed you're trans for years, and then you go ahead and you transition. Do you support this? Do you agree with the overwhelming medical evidence that this is something that benefits them? It's healthy for them to do that thing. And she's going to argue back on that, because if she agrees to that, she has to agree with the premises of the argument surrounding puberty blockers. If you're willing to agree that gender transition can be helpful to adults, then it becomes a medical issue. But Lauren Southern does not want transitioning to be thought of as a medical issue. She wants it to be thought of as a cosmetic issue. That's why people like her will always say, oh yeah, free country, you can transition if you're an adult, if you like. The same way you would say, sure, you can get a tattoo. Sure, you can get ear piercings or whatever, if you like. But if it's a medical issue, then its relevance to child health becomes way more apparent. Whereas if it's a cosmetic thing, she can make the same arguments that you would make about a child getting a tattoo, where you'd say, oh, sure, if they're an adult, they can. Absolutely. But, as a kid, I don't think that's appropriate. That's a long-term decision. But transitioning is not a cosmetic issue, or at least not entirely. It's a medical issue. So if you can pin her down on that before even talking about puberty blockers, then you already have a really strong forward foot rhetorically, because she's delusionally referring to transitioning as a cosmetic position when it's not. And if she's going to do that, then how could anyone trust her perspective on whether or not it's appropriate for children to take puberty blockers? She's lying about the nature of the entire medicinal program.
Right. So try to pin her down on like asking questions I'm trying to write a lot of this down here because my memory too is not the greatest.
Yeah, the VOD will be here too if you ever want to review it. And don't let her go to other points too. She brings up trans sports. Say, hey, we're not talking about trans sports here. We're just talking about transitioning. She brings up like this or that. No, we're very critically focused on this. It's a 1-2 point right here, right? Very, very clear. If you acknowledge that
don't let her
transitioning
run.
is a medical thing, she loves to gish gallop. By the way, she'll try to do that with you. And if you can acknowledge that transitioning is a medical matter, it's for people's health, it's not some cosmetic personal choice thing on its own, then you must acknowledge that we've made other decisions about children's health to this effect. We make life-altering decisions about children's health all the time. Schizophrenia medication. That's a huge one right there. Schizophrenia medication can have significant long-term side effects, consequences to your mental health, how you think, how you act. But if there's like a 12-year-old who's demonstrating symptoms of schizophrenia, who would argue against a trained psychiatrist determining the legitimacy of that condition and prescribing medication?
Right. Another one I like to bring up too is like even the side effects with ADHD medication and shit. People bring up like, because I know she's going to bring up puberty blockers and sterilization as well. So I like actually found a study which linked long-term use of ADHD drugs to impaired fertility in mammals, because I was planning on making similar arguments to that too. We already give kids medication in other areas, and also when it comes to medication just in general, we already always assess and determine if the benefits outweigh the risks, right?
Exactly.
Another thing I think I can ask her too is like, have you ever taken Tylenol for your headache? Too much of that shit, like if you take too much of that, it can literally cause fatal liver damage. But we recognize that the side effects for that are minuscule and rare, and so we determine that the benefits outweigh the negatives.
What about reconstructive surgery after an injury or a burn? What about cosmetics? Sometimes children will get cosmetic surgery because they have a physical deformity that is judged to be something that will be socially harmful in the future. Some kids, I know some kids have had skin grafts. They've had like really big moles that have been removed. These are cosmetic, but we still determine like, hey, this could be helpful. Yeah, cleft lip is a really great example. Sometimes we do this with children with deafness. We have medications and treatments for blindness. There are all these things we do to children that have permanent life effects on them.
Right.
And we do so because in consultation with doctors, we decide this is better for them. This is for their own good. But we don't even have to make this argument. And you should say this to her. You list these examples and then you say, and all these things I'm saying are non-reversible. Puberty blockers are reversible. All of these arguments I'm making where you agree with the necessity of subjecting children to permanent medical alterations for their own good are just that, permanent. Puberty blockers are reversible. They have been for decades. And the fledgling potential bone density issues that we're talking about, the incredibly minor and rare potential side effects are trivial compared to many of the consequences of what we're discussing right now that you already agree with. So what's this really about, Lauren? Is this about children's health, or are you just icked out by stuff you don't understand? And that, well, that's true. That's the line right there.
Right.
Does that
it always sounds so good. When you give me these examples, it always sounds so good.
Well, it's always easier in theory. In practice, Lauren Southern is rhetorically competent. Even if I were to speak with her with like all the notes and stuff beforehand, I would be very on my guard for any whoopsie daisy trick she tries to pull. But
you're getting me a little nervous here now. All right.
Well, you should, but you should be calm. Never think like you have like 17 retorts in your head. Which one do I go for? Just chill out a little bit. It's okay to just take a breather during the debate as well. She runs off like crazy with her talking points, but after she runs off a little bit, you can just, Lauren, you just said
we just focus on one thing.
let's just focus on that one point right there, okay? We're not running a marathon, okay? Don't come off too cunty because it'll disrupt the flow. But if you come off like you're just there to have a nice conversation, you used to watch Lauren Southern, whatever, we're just here to talk about a difference of opinions, and then The more she makes mistakes, the more ground you gain, the more confident you get to be. It's a currency.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
You
That's
buy
exactly what I was thinking. Right.
Yeah, with your effectiveness. And it goes the other way around too. The more she does that makes her look good, the more rhetorically effective she is, the more you have to be calm, confident, selective. Pick your points carefully, because if you start getting angry, loud, direct, confrontational, when it already looks like you're losing, it comes off like you're desperate. And I've seen this on the other side of the table so often when I debate people. You know it when you see it. They're not doing well, so they get angry with you. This is the worst possible look for an effective, rhetorical strategy.
It always makes your opponent look way better, for sure.
100%. But of course, if you do very well, if you give points that she can't really answer, or if you force her onto the next topic, that's something that you should do if you've felt the topic has been cycled around long enough, by the way. If you've given all the arguments you have on a subject, if she's just running the same points over and over, they do this too. She'll make a point, you respond to it, you debunk it, and then she'll make the point again. You have to say, eventually you have to put your foot down and say, okay, Lauren, we've been talking about this for 20 minutes. I feel like you're just repeating things that have already shut down already. Okay, right. Do you want to move on? Do you have anything more? Is it going to be the same point again? Or yeah, and then you move to the next point, and she doesn't look great after that, you know?
Right, because then it kind of gives me the control of the conversation. There's a lot to try to remember. I do think that it's true that try to pick the weakness. I don't need to respond to all the points.
God, no.
And that's definitely a weakness of mine, is that I'm too focused on like debunking everything they say in one swift move. So I think that my goal is, and this is kind of like what I talked to with Demon Mama a little bit too. Just take like the cool, calm, and like educated approach. You mentioned how a lot of it probably will be like some debunking stuff, which thankfully is what I'm good at, and I do have a good amount of notes that I can bring in if necessary. Mm-hmm. I already have preempted a little bit of preparation for some of the arguments I'm expecting. For example, I've heard her bring up the fact that she was a tomboy when she was a kid. And so she might try to argue.
When I was a kid, maybe if crazy trans ideology had been around back then, I would have been pushed by my parents and doctor into being a boy because I was a tomboy back then. Heard that one a million times. No, of course. Gender therapy clinics don't work that way. This is this mantra they try to push. The idea that if a boy puts on lipstick once, instantly is the NHS fucking wheelbarrows them out into the nearest gender clinic so they can spend exactly 3 minutes in consultation before plastic tips are stapled onto his chest. No, of course not. In fact, if she makes that argument, you should make fun of her for it. Like, this is a child's view. This is like a ridiculous view of how gender.
Well, not even that, but it's literally like, if you look at and I don't like that it says disorder, but like if you look at the International Classification of Disorders, it explicitly says mere tomboyishness in girls or girlish behavior in boys is not sufficient for any kind of like gender identity disorder, diagnosing that.
Gender dysphoria, which is in the current DSM categorized as a mental illness, not being trans, but the gender dysphoria. Right. It's a very important distinction some people don't appreciate, but it does matter. And in its description, in order to be diagnosed as such, you need to have I forget the exact language, but the gender dysphoria, the discomfort with your body, the incongruence between your identity and your body is so severe that it causes you mental anguish. Anguish being the term here. Not, oh, I wish my tits were flatter so that I could look more cute in this, vest and flannel shirt combo, not.
And the American Psychological Association even says that you got to show gender dysphoria for 6 months. So if she brings up like anything about like rushing kids in, minimum, right?
And it's even higher for children. And for children, it's not just that. There's also the initial consults that are done. Because with a child, you can't just trust them to say, I'm a girl. Like, if they're like 10 years old, like, you obviously want them to be assessed, clinically beforehand, extensively. I know people who transitioned, or at least had puberty blockers before they were adults, and all of them, to a person, have described the process of their initial diagnosis taking years.
Yeah.
Not 6 months, years. And that's just for the puberty blockers. And then after the puberty blockers, you still have the hormones. And that's its own process. And then
Right.
after that, there's the if you decide to have some kind of surgical treatment, and that's an even greater standard that you have to pass. It is insane how difficult it is. If she brings up I could have been a tomboy, my parents would have instantly whisked me to the no. Absolute, just ridiculous, completely ridiculous. Delusional, even, completely uninformed or willfully ignorant of the way in which this actually works.
I like to use the term delusional when discussing these with people too, because they oftentimes say that the trans people are delusional. I guess my other question too would be like, because sometimes what happens to me is I'm just too good faith, you know, and I want to answer all the questions. No, I'm just kidding. But I want to answer the questions, and when they ask me questions, my initial response again is to answer. Like sometimes I can tell I'm being led somewhere, and what am I supposed to do there? Because I know it can look really weaselly if you don't answer a question.
So give me an example. Where would you be led?
I was arguing with like a fascist the other day, and oh shit, I'm trying to think of what he asked me that I felt like was a leading question.
You can tell when they're doing it, though. It's always like, I mean, say, for example, it would be a race realist. Well, you acknowledge black people commit higher crime, right? And you acknowledge that their average IQ scores are lower, right? Therefore, like, they're making you set up the premises for their argument. It's a fairly common rhetorical tactic that, by the way, you should also do. The solution to it, of course, is to preempt whatever conclusion they're leading you towards and debunk it before you finish setting up the premises. Like, it makes you look like some kind of Sherlockian genius. Like, they've had you lay down two premises by asking you questions, and you know in your head you're like, there's got to be two or three more, and then they have their conclusion. I know what it is, and then you respond to the conclusion. You're like, all right, enough of the games. Here's what you're actually trying to say. If you can pull that off, it looks really good.
Okay.
Of course, you have to be right. If you're wrong and you preempt the wrong question, it makes you look like a tryhard, which is less good.
Which is kind of a risk you got to take. That's why I feel a lot less nervous kind of going into this, is trying to when I try to think of it as just like gonna have a conversation. And yeah, I've noticed too that a lot of the times when I start my conversations off with that mindset, right? Like, just here to talk to Lauren Southern, someone who I used to watch, like we used to kind of be on like the same side with shit. Let's talk about our difference of opinion here. I can honestly, I've recognized times where I've debated, and then I feel as I'm going along and as I've made more and more points, yeah, it's easier to get more and more confident because you've already started laying that out. Mm-hmm. So I think that it sounds like the good faith kind of charitable approach is definitely going to be the best and most compelling direction to take.
Well, charitability is a spectrum, remember. Charitability, the extent to which you're willing to make other people's arguments for them, is a balance that you have to strike depending on the goals you have for your conversation, you know? An incredibly uncharitable person reaches a point of dishonesty where they will deliberately misinterpret what others say to them in an effort to... a classic example of pathological uncharitability is does this make me look fat? No, it doesn't. You look great, you know? Oh, I look great? I don't look fantastic? Or some bullshit like that. You know, the stupid, like, sitcom tier, like, women are irrational type argument. But that is an example of, essentially, extreme uncharitability. But if you're overly charitable, you run the risk of making your opponent's arguments for them, where they're giving you 50% of the way, and you're positively interpreting what they have to say to the extent that you're helping them out. But your goal in a debate is not to arrive at the truth. The goal in a debate is to crush your opponent. So if they can't make the whole argument, you should never help them out. Even if it's like you see them struggling right there at the precipice of being able to make an effective argument, the most you should ever do is point out they're not quite there yet. The only exemption to that, or the only reason why you should be willing to give them some argument points for them, is if you think you can lead them into a position that gives you an even greater dunk. So you're trying to like lead them up to the gallows, essentially. So there was one time I argued with a Nazi on stream. I mean, I don't remember which time, but they were making an argument that felt like it was basically implying the Jewish question. Chat, maybe you guys remember this, but he wasn't directly saying it. So what I did was I half answered his questions and gave him a couple of probing responses until he directed the full question at me, the Jewish question one, which allowed me to tear into him. I gave him just enough rope to hang himself with. But that's the only time. Unless you're leading them to the gallows, you never want to give people's arguments any leeway, you know?
Okay. So maybe charitable then. When I say charitable, I mean try to like
kind, affable.
I don't know. Just try to be like, okay, so I understand where you're coming from, and if this were the case, then maybe that would be a reason for concern. But kind of like that's when I say charitable, I almost mean in that sense. Try to at least come across. I think that good faith is actually the word I'm looking for, better than charitable though.
Good faith. Yeah, you want to be affable. You want to be kind. You want to come off like you're legitimately hearing what they have to say, you know? And then like if they fuck it up, you're like, you were so close, but alas, you fucked up. You know?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm obviously gonna have to think it through a little more on like how I don't want to be too condescending. I want to come across like polite, but then I also do want to try to. I mean, I'm trying to see here if I wrote down any other notes. I wrote down when you talked about appealing to intellect, emotion, and strength, and then I was thinking, I talked to Demon Mom a little bit about ways that I might be able to appeal to Lauren's emotion, specifically her. So like, I feel like there might be something there with the fact that now we're both parents. And I think she's 25, so we're like basically the same age, and we're both parents now.
That's not a line.
So I feel.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh well, that's not a line I can really run. On account of me being not a parent. But yeah, if you managed to pull that off, you could be like, you know, Lauren, you're a parent, I'm a parent. What if you had a kid? You know, that kid was like 11, 12, 13 maybe, and they were saying, yeah, and that, like they were born a boy, and they're like, yeah, I think I'm a girl, and they've been, you know, kind of leaning that way their childhood, and they're like, no, I really do think that, and you notice them getting depressed, you notice them exhibiting suicidal tendencies, which all correlate, by the way, exactly with what you would expect for a trans youth who wasn't given support from a family member. Like, don't you think it would be worthwhile to at least have them talk at a gender clinic? I mean, if they ended up killing themselves, like, would you be like, oh, well, at least I didn't take them to see a doctor, you know? Maybe that's a little bit callous. Something
that would probably be a little, but something along those lines, I absolutely think I could go in that direction. I also think in a way like, let's say, for example, that she says like kids are being rushed in, blah blah blah. Like, I could even be like, Lauren, like I'm a parent. Obviously, if there was like some kind of malicious procedure being given irresponsibly to children, I would want to be the first person to know. But that's just not what's happening, and then I would proceed to go into it essentially. Yeah. Maybe that thing. You can give me your thoughts.
No, I think that's perfectly agreeable. It's really just a matter of how well it sells. Wait, hold on. What's that? No. I'm working. Your job is to handle the cats, and my job is to make money and pay for the house. Hunter, have you seen my skin cat?
I have seen multiple pictures of your skin cat on Twitter.
Well, if you're taking a look at the stream right now, she's
all right, let me get you.
Being a menace.
She being a menace. Let's see. Aww.
She doesn't like being held, but there we go. There we go. There we go. Here.
Aww.
Camera, you want to focus? Maybe a little.
Look at that thing.
She's very ugly, but we love her.
No, she's got a lovable face.
Yeah, well, great personality too. Wait, hold on. Hyena, close the door. No, you are not locking Pigeon.
That's right, Pigeon. I couldn't remember the name. Hi, Vaush's chat. How you guys doing?
The debate's tomorrow, right?
Yeah, it's tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow at 6:30. So, thankfully, tomorrow I'm still gonna have some time to sort of prepare, do a little bit of research ahead of time. I think that, my main thing too is I do a lot of research, maybe too much beforehand. Like, I mean, I have like 10 pages of notes, and maybe that's just too much.
Imagine
It was
reading.
interesting. Yeah, it was interesting hearing you talk about how you don't do that much prep beforehand, and I kind of wonder if maybe I'm like, I need to prepare obviously to a degree. I'm not saying I don't need to do anything, but like sometimes I think I might over prepare, and it literally becomes like obsessive almost for me. Like it's the only thing I can think about.
Yeah, well, the reason why I don't do much prep before debates is mostly because it makes me want to do the thing I told you not to do, which is have a litany of information in my head that I want to recite at the most immediate possible time, you know? Because
Right.
I mean, anytime, if you're debating a conservative, reading more than a couple sentences on Wikipedia is almost by definition over preparing. And you come off way less rhetorically effective over prepping and then delivering all that information than you do swaggering in confidently, knowing two or three things they don't, like taking a huge dump on their chest and then walking out.
Right.
Again, debates are not a great way at arriving at the truth of a matter. They're super duper not. It's just debates are about pulling over audiences and trying to get them on the right track to a position. That's not
Yeah.
to say you should lie or that the information that you promote is inaccurate, because it's not. It's just
Right.
the extent to which the format enables fruitful discourse, which is to say very little.
Yeah. And that's kind of why I think that taking the more conversational approach, especially at first, I think is going to be better for me. I just tend to do better in that setting. It also helps me be more relaxed, and I don't feel the need to like respond right away with the best possible argument right away, like immediately, and kind of gives me time to just have a conversation, feel out what's going on, and take a deep breath, try to relax, I guess, and go into a
Yeah.
cool, calm, and
And always
confidently.
remember, keep it simple. And you're there to be friendly, but not to be friends. Because if you come off looking like you're trying to reach out far enough that you're trying to meet them halfway on their positions, you can end up giving unnecessary ground on your arguments. They should have to fight for every inch they take from you, like argumentatively, and you should hold
Right.
the line at whatever position they've given. One of the things that I find most, I don't know, funny or cathartic in debates
Hmm.
is when a person will concede a position, but then later they realize, because they're stupid, that they needed that position to make their full argument later. They can't. They gave it up too quickly, So then they jump
Hmm.
back to that position, and then if you call them out on that, like, "Oh my God, you gave that to me earlier. You already conceded that, and now you're running back to it. Did you forget that you would need it for your argument to make sense?" Oh my God, it's really, really funny. Just
Okay.
tremendous stuff right there.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds like I'm not expecting that style with Lauren Southern, to be truthful.
Depends on how it
I'm
runs down, always. If she gets
does, yeah.
angry and starts like freaking out, if you try that kid analogy and she starts like hardcore getting angry with you, then you have opportunities there that you may be able to take advantage of. Like, are you uncomfortable with these questions, Lauren Southern? Did you just want to like spew out your talking points and leave? Is it uncomfortable applying your
Right.
horrible ideas to a real world hypothetical? Is the idea of doing to your child what you suggest others do to their children make you uncomfortable, Lauren? Isn't that a bit hypocritical? If you can run those lines down really hard, I mean, whew, you can
That would be pretty hard. Yeah.
and the madder she
That'd be
gets,
good.
of course, the more mistakes she'll make, which is usually to your benefit.
Right, which yeah. Yep, I'm going to just try to take a really calm approach then. Try my best to give I want to take like a very factual approach because that is what I'm good with. I'm not going to, I'm going to take your advice, obviously not try to deliver all the information at once. I'm going to but I don't know. I guess the tough thing is thinking about it through the minds of the audience and not through myself. Part of the reason I feel like our debate was so effective for me is because I am compelled by empirical shit. Like that, like data and studies and shit always have like played a big role in like how I try to like form my opinions and stuff. So I feel like that worked really well when we debated when I was still right wing, but maybe that won't work as well for an overall audience.
It
I don't
won't.
know.
You're unique, Hunter. If you weren't, then I wouldn't like you so much. It's the vast majority of people who are on the right are not going to be swayed by data. But it is fantastic that you live a life that allows you to naively believe there are other people like you.
I know there aren't, but I wish there were. The other
There's
thing is though
some,
too is
I mean, it's not, it's not all of them, but usually you
if
need a
you
big
bring
knock.
up data and then they clown on that, then you can make fun of them so quick for being like anti-intellectual.
Yeah, though if they ever give the position up, I mean, because sometimes they'll just they'll like delusionally keep pushing past it, like, oh yeah, you only have one study. What's one study? And then you give them like 3 more, and they're like, 4 studies. What are the sample sizes here in the triple digits? I thought, don't you need at least 10,000 people for this kind of like they'll infinite cope that. But if they start infinite coping, then you can just be like, okay, not enough evidence for you, person with no studies at all. We can move on if you're not comfortable. There's always something. There's always a trick.
Right.
There is never a hole you can't climb out of as long as there's something rhetorically effective you can say. Whether it's you being funny or you being kind, it's the momentum that you get, the slingshot effect. There's always something you can say. Of course, knowing what to say in the moment is very difficult.
That's the tough part.
Yeah, you can assemble
That's why I'm just
shower afterwards, but doing it
exactly. I'm gonna give this debate/discussion with Lauren tomorrow the absolute best fucking shot I have.
Yeah. Hey, don't take it too serious. We're on an hour and a half now, I think. And
yeah, I'm gonna have to split here too.
Yeah, I gotta play some Resident Evil, but don't take it too serious, because the more serious you take it, the more nervous you'll be, and the more nervous you're going to be, the more likely you are to make the mistakes that are going to make you hate yourself afterwards. Just chill with it, run in, keep it simple, no biggie. Whether it goes poorly or goes well, beating yourself up over it doesn't really do anything good for anybody, so probably better to approach it with a more, this here to do our best type dealio.
Yeah, and also I'm trying to keep my motivation in this discussion a little different. I'm not motivated as much as I have been in the past with me trying to look good, which I recognize is kind of a bad motivation to have. And I'm more motivated by just hoping that I can kind of, push some positive change here, whether it be I don't think that I'm going to change Lauren Southern's mind, but I think that if I can take a calm and cool, collected approach, I tend to do a lot better with the audience too afterwards than when I'm. The
goal is always to move the audience. Lauren Southern will never will never change her mind on these issues. Lauren Southern's political positions will always be motivated by what she thinks will be most effective in spreading far-right ideology. And that will never be being pro-trans, so she will never move to that. Well, actually, I don't know. Maybe in 10 years, people will be so pro-trans on average that she has to bite the bullet on that in order to be anti-whatever the fuck else she's going to be next, Who knows? That's the hope, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, Hunter, I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for the advice. I definitely I wrote down a couple things you told me here, and I definitely feel a little bit more prepared. And yeah, since keeping my mentality in this, let's just go for it, have a conversation. I'm trying not to let myself get nervous or anything. I already feel a lot more calm and relaxed and confident for the discussion tomorrow. So
yeah,
thanks a lot for talking.
Too much, eat a nice meal, etc. You have a good one. Okay.
Will do. Have a good rest of your night.
Take care.
See ya.